Good morning. I am Amy Landolt from North Shore Acupuncture Center, and this is part of a series that I've been doing. It spans 3 weeks, and it's Perimenopausal in a Pandemic. And the goal of this series really is to celebrate perimenopause. There's so many amazing things that happen to us during this transition. So I want to highlight some of those, but also give people some tips of what they can do to minimize any negative side effects and change their perspective on some of those side effects as well. So one of the topics that I wanted to talk about is perimenopause. For a lot of people tends to be a point in our life where we start to find our voice and speak our truth, where we, in the past, we might have defaulted to being nice and not making other people uncomfortable. And that starts to change for many women at this period. So that is what we will be speaking with today, or on today. Before we get started, I do want to mention, if you have any questions, please put the questions in the comments, and I'll make sure I incorporate those into the conversation. Or if you have comments, include the comments as well. And if you're watching this Facebook Live later, after we're no longer live, you can still add your questions and comments. And if you have questions, we'll try to get answers back to you on those as well. But to have this conversation with me, because it's kind of weird talking to yourself, I invited Lisa Kaplin. And Lisa Kaplin is a psychologist and a certified professional life and executive coach. And one of the reasons I invited Lisa to do this with me is I actually took a class that was about this topic with Lisa Kaplin and Catherine Johns. It was about it might have been called Find Your Voice, Speak Your Truth. That might be where it
Yeah, it was called Find Your Voice, I think, or something like that. Yeah.
So I've already had this discussion. That was the first time I met her. And that was the day long. We're going to try to keep it much shorter, just an intro conversation here. But Lisa, like I said, is a life coach and a psychologist, and is an executive corporate speaker, which is her speaking gig was where I was connecting with her. And she helps people overcome stress and overwhelm in order to find joy in their personal life and success and meaning in their professional lives. So a great fit for when you're going through those life changes like perimenopause. So thank you, Lisa, for joining me today.
Happy to be here, Amy. Thank you.
So just to get us started, how do you even go about finding your voice? Because sometimes I hear people say, like, I've put other people's needs ahead of mine, or other people's comfort, or listen to what I heard from my parents and my friends and my community and my church, that I don't even know what my truth is. So how do you start figuring that out?
It's a huge issue. It's so common. I cannot tell you how many of my female clients in particular say to me, I have no idea what I want. I have no idea what I like. I was working with a client yesterday and she kept telling me what everybody else wanted, and I kept stopping her and saying, I'm sorry, what do you want? And she finally said, I don't know. And so that's really the first step, is if you don't know what you want, how can you ask for it? Right? So it starts as like something simple as, did you ever watch the movie Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts?
Yeah.
The movie's just okay, but there's a scene where some guy says to her, you don't even know what kind of eggs you like, because she would always pick the kind of eggs of the guy she was dating or about to marry. And it was such a great scene because she laid out all the eggs, scrambled, all the different kinds of eggs, and tried them. And so that's really it. Who are you? What do you really like? What makes you happy? And every time you hear yourself say, well, so-and-so wants me to, or my husband wants me to, or my parents want me to, or they only feel good when, then you actually are not in touch with your own voice, which is okay. But to get there, you got to do a little inner work first, for sure.
Yeah, I follow Glennon Doyle as much as I can. And one of the stories she talks about a lot is her son had a group of friends over, some boys and girls that were, I can't remember the right age, maybe 13 or 14. And she went into the room and said, are you guys hungry? Do you want something to eat? And all the boys immediately said yes. And she noticed all the girls all looked around the room at each other and somehow came to a consensus on whether they were hungry or not. So the boys were checking in with their gut, their stomach, and saying, yes, I'm hungry, and speaking
Right.
up. But the girls felt like they had to check and get consensus and couldn't speak a simple question. Are you hungry? Do you want food?
Right. So that really, it says like, how young are we giving the message, subtly or not so subtly, to girls and women that your voice is second here. It's not the most important voice. I sent out a weekly blog, and I sent out my blog this morning, and my blog was about asking yourself, and particularly women, what do I need right now? What do I need to feel better, to take care of myself? And I got some heart-wrenching responses where a few women said, "Oh my gosh, I never do this." And they said, wow, no wonder I don't feel good. I haven't even asked myself what would feel good, right? So, and these are adult women, probably close to perimenopause age, figuring this out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one thing that I found to start understanding what I like is first creating space for myself. So, somehow creating quiet, whether it's meditation, walking in the woods,
Yeah.
painting, whatever it is,
Yeah.
so that I can start to hear that voice, but also checking in with my body. Um,
Yes.
so creating that quiet and asking, heart, what do you feel? Stomach, what do you feel? And just giving it a little space. And sometimes gradually those answers will start to come out. What do you want?
Yes, when you give yourself the space, for sure. And the really interesting thing, that checking with your body, when I ask women that, they say, well, I always know when I don't want it because I have like that tightening in my chest or my stomach flips. But when I do want it, everything feels like in flow, in connection. So stopping and just even listening to that is huge. One of my clients said yesterday, talked about, she said, I'm standing in the noise all the time. And she couldn't hear herself because she's standing in the noise. And the noise was a lot of her own messages to herself. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. So a good tip I heard from that was from Sonia Choquette. And we had Sonia Tolley on to talk about intuition, her daughter, and we talked about this as well. But I have that with a lot of noise in my brain. And what she recommends is that you check in with your brain so it gets a chance to talk. So when I said check in with your heart and gut, first you say, brain, ego, what do you think? And give it a chance to give it say, and then check with your heart and check with your gut. And really, the ego does have useful information and wisdom that we incorporate in. So give it a chance to talk instead of trying to just ignore it. And that allows the other things to open up as well.
Well, and I think too, with that awareness space of, I always ask my clients, what are you saying to yourself about that? And sometimes when they hear what they're saying to themselves, they're like, no wonder I feel like crap because I'm saying these horrible things to myself. And then they have the opportunity to decide if that's what they want to say. They can change it, right? You can change the messaging. And so once you do that, you have all the power. And then you could choose, you're in choice then.
So any other tips for how you can start finding your voice and understanding what your truth is?
What was that?
And understanding what your truth is.
It's you need some quiet space to really listen and think about it. Meditation is great. Walking is great. Maybe journaling. The other tip that I often talk to people about is, maybe you say, I want pizza for dinner. Okay. Just can you tell I'm hungry? I'm using food as my examples, but I want pizza for dinner. Then ask yourself why. Why? Keep asking why. It's actually a Six Sigma thing. It's a corporate thing, but keep asking yourself why. Are you saying you want pizza because your husband wants pizza? Or are you saying you want pizza because that's really what you want to eat? And if you keep asking yourself that why, digging, like peeling that onion back, you get to some real answers for yourself. But with that, and this is a really important piece, is to not judge yourself. So a lot of times women will realize what they've been saying to themselves and then go, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I've been saying that. And just not helpful. Like hear the voice and then please do not criticize the voice because that's not helpful.
Yes. I remember the Six Sigma from the corporate America days. And the great story is the Jefferson Memorial, I think, and why it needed to be washed so often all of a sudden. And there's a good why story there.
I'll have to check that one out.
So how do you speak your truth? So a lot of times we struggle with it because we don't want to make other people uncomfortable, or it doesn't feel safe to speak our truth because we're going to get pushback, or we're going against what our community thinks we should be saying. So how do you get the courage to speak up?
So one is that you choose consciously to speak up. So what happens often is we're afraid to speak up, we're afraid to speak up, we're afraid to speak up, and then all of a sudden we speak up, and it comes out in a way that's probably, we don't feel good about it, and it's probably not received well, because it's just like, F you, we like blurt it out, and then not so helpful. So get really clear about what you want your message to be, and thinking about how can you portray your message in a way where you don't feel like a victim, where you're not super angry, where you're kind of not defensive or rationalizing, but rather like, I'm going to speak my truth in a way that's a win-win, like a truly assertive, like if I wanted to share with you something about your business, that I say it in a way that I want to help you and also tell my truth. But if I only am saying it to hurt you, then I won't feel good about that. And you won't feel good about that, right? And it's not about, I think when we are not sharing our truth because we want people to like us, that's doomed. It's doomed to failure, right? Because we're putting a mask on ourselves. But when we're telling our truth in the belief that this will either empower our relationship or end the relationship, and either one is going to be okay with me, but I'm gonna share my truth. But this is where I think people get sharing our truth doesn't mean like, I don't like your picture and your background. That's like an unnecessary truth. Sharing your truth is, I feel this way when this happens. Can we talk about it? So it doesn't mean that everything that comes into my mind needs to come out of my mouth. Trust me.
I think that's a good point in going back to your uncovering your whys. So before you speak, just doing some reflection to say, why is it that I want to share this? Is it about me? What are my intentions? And understanding that can prevent you from getting in trouble a bit.
And if my why is just to hurt somebody else, then that means I'm hurting, and that means go back to the drawing board. Why am I hurting? Let's check in with myself first, because I never want to hurt somebody back. Sometimes I feel like it, like I'd love to take some revenge on a few people these days, but ultimately I don't feel that way because I know that only hurts me. So the why is, again, peeling that onion down to, why is this important to me to share this part of my voice, or this is, how I feel.
Mm-hmm. So I know one of the things I struggle with is sharing what I want to share, and because I haven't done it, I haven't practiced that, it doesn't come out smoothly. And so sometimes it does have the unintended consequences, and then I beat myself up for it, like you said. And so I think for me, it's being compassionate with myself and realizing when you first start speaking up about different things that are challenging for you, you haven't done it. And whenever you haven't done something before, you need practice to get better.
Totally.
You can't wait till you're going to be perfect, because you can't be perfect without practice. You can't think about it enough to, like Michael Jordan didn't just think about, he might have envisioned and done some work mentally before getting on but that wasn't all he did. Eventually he picked up a basketball, right?
And he practiced, right? If we're all watching that series about him, we know what he did, right? He kept working. Absolutely. I think too is when we're talking about using our voice and sharing our voice, to do it in the most authentic way possible. So sometimes even saying, Amy, I want to share something with you that I'm uncomfortable with, or, I'm a little nervous about saying these things, but they're important to me, and I value our relationship, so I want to talk about this. And then it'll be imperfect. There's no such thing as perfect, right? And be kind with yourself. And if somebody reacts, the reaction ultimately is about them, right? And you own what you said, and they get to own their reaction to it, which doesn't mean we don't take responsibility and we don't intentionally be cruel to people. But yeah, there's no such thing as like a perfect communication, and communication and sharing our feelings and sharing our voice is really complicated, because what might work in my conversation with you might be disastrous in my conversation with somebody else. So it also means, switching hats a little bit, moving it around a little bit.
Or even what you use with me today might be fine, but if you did the same approach tomorrow or even this afternoon, it might be disaster.
Right, we're at different times and how we feel, and did you just get beat on by somebody else, and now I'm coming in with my conversation with you, and you're like, you know what, enough, people, out of here. Right, it always can show up turn out differently, but I think the main thing is to keep going, keep trying. One of my favorite books is Radical Candor. Have you ever read that book?
No.
It's really about giving feedback. It's more in the corporate world, but certainly beneficial to all of us. And she talks about how we're not empowering ourselves to give feedback and to receive feedback, and how important that is to relationships. And then what happens is we're hiding either in aggressiveness or passiveness, and then we're not having healthy communication with each other. We're just yelling and screaming, which is so useless.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely damages our relationships. I think the other thing you inferred earlier is when you're not speaking your truth because you want to prevent hurting someone's feelings, you're masking yourself, and you're not having the type of connection that you really could, because we can all pick up when someone isn't authentic. We might not know exactly what is going on, but we get a sense, and that keeps us from fully connecting with the person as much as we could.
Totally. And then, what happens is it like builds on itself, that I'm not being truthful with you, so you're not being truthful with me, right? And so all of a sudden we have this very distant, not connected, not honest relationship. Yeah. And then we feel like we're holding everything in. How could that serve us physically or mentally?
So what are some of the areas that you see that women struggle the most with as far as speaking their truth?
Asking for what they want. That is like, I didn't even have to wait for you to finish the sentence. Asking for what they want. What do you want? Right? What do you want from your partners? What do you want from your children? You're not always going to get it, but if you don't ask for what you want, you're definitely not going to get it. Right? So being very clear. So I hear this a lot from women is, oh, they should know. They don't know. How do they know? You didn't tell them. Like, you'll love this. I've been married 30 years. Every year for 29 years, I don't like Valentine's Day. It drives me nuts. Okay, so every year for 29 years, I said to my husband, don't buy me flowers on Valentine's Day. Also, I'm cheap. And I'm like, they're too expensive. Like, please don't. This year, 30 years of being married, he did not get me flowers on Valentine's Day. And I could tell he was like nervous. He was nervous. And he bought me flowers like a week later. And I was like, this is what I want. And they were gorgeous, by the way. And they were half the price. And I was like, see? This worked. I told you what I wanted. You did it. We're both happy. This is a win-win. And by the way, we saved about $100 on that little move right there. But it's sometimes people don't believe it. Keep going. Keep nicely saying it. Keep asking for what you want.
Yeah, that's one of the things I struggle with. I ask, but I only ask once. So I asked, and they didn't do it.
Like, how dare you? Right. And sometimes people think you want what they would want. And so asking again, and the other thing is sometimes I see women thinking they're asking and they're not asking. So they're like hinting. And ask needs to be like a very clear, I do not want flowers on Valentine's Day. I'd love to get flowers 2 weeks later. That's clear. And if they don't do it, okay, that's up to them, 29 years. But if they do, it means, it's been clear and you've been heard, and there you go.
Yeah. One of the hints for me that I'm not communicating is if I start to feel resentful. Anytime I'm resentful, it seems to be going back to some communication thing. Either I've decided what someone wants and I'm doing it for them and they're not appreciating it. And they might not want it at all. Like the flowers. If I was giving you the flowers, and why isn't Lisa appreciating these flowers I'm giving her every day? So it's usually I'm doing something without knowing if someone really wants that, or I'm not setting boundaries that I need to feel happy. And like to your point, the other person has no idea.
They have no clue. They have no clue. I work with someone, and recently, and she's awesome to work with, and I would text her over the weekend, and business related questions, and finally one day she sends a text back and says, "I'm going to ask you not to text me on the weekends," and I was like, "Ooh, yeah, probably should have thought of that, but I loved it," and I was like, "You're totally right. Thank you for telling me," because sometimes I don't even realize it's the weekend when you have your own business. You often don't because it's just time. And, I love that it was a direct request. It was very specific. And she even said, here are the reasons you could text me over the weekend. And they were very specific emergency related things. Fantastic. But she ended up telling me later that it took her, honestly, like 3 or 4 weeks to get the confidence to do that.
Yes.
Right? And I could relate to that.
Yeah, it was funny. I don't know if you got a chance to see my discussion with Queen, but she had a suggestion for how we format our conversation, and she emailed me about it, and it was a great suggestion, but I didn't respond right away. And she internalized that, and she was nervous about making that suggestion to begin with, and then that I didn't respond, that she had offended me. And we actually, I loved her suggestion, and my perspective on it matched hers, and she didn't feel alone once we talked about it. But I was shocked because she seemed so confident to me, and I was like, wow, other people go through this.
Well, other people doubt themselves, right? And we make interpretations sometimes, and that is the other thing. I love, by the way, that she told you, which is really, that's the heart of this, is sometimes we interpret something like, I don't think Amy liked how I answered that question, and then I internalize that instead of asking, like, Amy, did I answer that question okay? It's almost that simple, right? But when we don't do it, the resentment, just like what you said, the resentment builds and builds and builds and builds.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think comes up sometimes are isms. So how do all of the isms, racism, sexism, heterosexism, all the phobias, transphobia, xenophobia, how does that come into play with knowing our truth and speaking our truth?
Man, and it is a rough time right now in our country around this topic. Gosh, I kind of don't even know where to start sometimes with that. I guess, well, let me say this. Certainly as white privileged women, our job, I think, right now is to listen, is to actually shut up and listen to the other voices, and to acknowledge the pain and validate the pain, and not try to talk anybody out of it. And so for sexism, same thing, is to voice that is not okay. What you said to me was not okay. Talking to me that way is not okay. Excluding me from meetings is not okay. Here's what I want from you. And to stand in that power, knowing full well that it might not be received, and it might not be received well. Did I tell you this? I don't know if I told you this. Last year I did, for a company, I went all across the country and did sexual harassment trainings all across the country for them. And I was sexually harassed numerous times. And I'll tell you, it was so frustrating. And I kept having to say to myself, say something like, that's not okay. Putting that little note in front of me is not okay. Saying those words to me, not okay. I got asked out on a date at a sexual harassment training. Really? Hello? Not okay. You know what I mean? And I had to say, that's not appropriate. Especially because I had already mentioned that I was married. By the way, if I wasn't married, that is not appropriate. But so I just kept calming myself down, taking a breath and then saying to myself, okay, what do you want to have happen here? What do you want to say to this person? And I didn't want to do it in like anger and aggression, because then it's just anger and aggression up and back. And that's not helpful. So I'd say, when you say this, this is how it feels to me, and this is why it's unacceptable in this setting, or any really setting, to behave that way. What they do with that is up to them.
Right.
That's the short answer of the whole ism thing. There's just so much there. You need like a full year of talks on that.
Yeah, I think a good starting point is, and I should have looked it up. I didn't think about this beforehand, but the implicit bias test that you can go through.
Yes.
To understand where some of your biases are. You still have a lot, like I still have a lot of self-education that is not complete. I'll be doing for the rest of my life, but It gives you a starting place. Even to think about, I'm a woman, but according to that, I am sexist. And so being aware of their own sexism, because you can be, you were raised in a sexist society. My kids point that out to me all the time too. So being aware of that, and back to your earlier question of the 5 whys, understanding your intentions and what's driving you to do that before you respond to something is important.
Yes, absolutely.
It doesn't mean always just vomiting, like you said early. It doesn't mean speaking up and being tone deaf. It's educating yourself as well and understanding your biases and how they form what you think is your truth.
Yes, absolutely. I think I saw that whole thing that happened in Central Park with that woman, and what she said. My guess is she had some internal unexplored biases that just came out in a moment, that I'm pretty sure she's gonna regret for the rest of her life. And if she had some insight into herself and our own biases and our own fears and all the things, then probably she could have stopped and taken a breath and managed that situation. By the way, just put your damn dog on the leash. But besides that, you know what I mean? Like the whole thing and that awareness. In fact, the guy that she did that to said, I don't think tearing her whole life down is the answer, is going to solve racism. It's really each of us exploring where that racism comes from and actually wanting to release it. Right?
Yeah. That brings up, so that was my platform yesterday, because I saw a lot of white people distancing themselves from her and from the police officer that murdered George Floyd. And I think in those cases, maybe it was someone that was more of an overt racist, but it isn't overt racism that is killing and injuring most people. It's racism by people like you and me who have good intentions. And I think when you say there's just a few bad apples and other people aren't like that, you're doing that to make yourself comfortable instead of looking at the truth of your own racism and how that hurts people. And that can hurt people in my profession by me making assumptions about someone that could cost their life, because I might not refer them to a doctor when I should, or at a minimum could make me miss something and cause them to be in pain longer than they need to be. If I take matters into my own hands and call the police based on my biases, or ask a friend to help intervene or intervene myself, I could hurt someone because those biases are causing me to do it when it's inappropriate. Like, I was in corporate America. My biases impacted every person of color that I managed, every single person. And I was trying to be good. I was attending things, but until you do the work, and you're not ever done with the work.
No, you're never done. Right. You just had to keep looking. And this is like full ownership. It's easy to point fingers right now, but ultimately, don't we each need to take ownership of what we bring to the table? Yeah.
So one of the things I told Lisa before I started is I have my shirt on, nevertheless, got a nice trans flag. And so one of the things that I was told right away when I started my business is not to ever talk politics or not to talk about my views that are controversial. And I do. Or not to swear. And I'll say fuck on here. I'm not going to swear like a sailor all the time, but if you come in, the truth is, if you come in to see me at some point, I might swear. And if you're offended, it's better to know up front before you waste any money on me.
Right, then I might not be your acupuncturist, right, if that's the case. But I think that is an important piece, and this is one I struggle with all the time, like that, you know, being a women's empowerment coach, and you know, raising your voice or sharing your voice, there are so many political issues, and you know, how do you do that gracefully, but also we should not be silent. We should not be silent in the face of some of the things that we're seeing and some of the behaviors that are occurring. And so finding the way that you feel most comfortable to share your opinion and share your voice and maybe challenge people, challenge yourself. Yeah.
And that's a good point. It's finding it in your way. I always forget her last name. Austin Channing, is it Brown? I just finished her book, but she talks about how she wanted to be the person that expressed her anger that was just really loud and in your face. But that's not who she is. She is more of a quieter, you know, so she still shares it, but she shares it in her own way instead of trying to be someone that she's not, which I think is important.
Yes, that authenticity. And also, though, that's a conscious choosing of how to use your voice versus an unconscious reaction, right? Like Martin Luther King used anger, but he used it consciously and strategically, right? It wasn't just I'm in reaction mode and I'm going to yell and scream at people. It was very thoughtful and intentional.
That's a great point. People sometimes think I should never be communicating anger, but to your point, anger is a fuel. It tells us that something needs to change, either a boundary has been crossed. It understands what's important to us, what we feel needs to be changed in the world. And so you use that, as he did so eloquently, as fuel, not vomit.
Yeah, exactly. And anger it's a human emotion. Good luck not ever having anger, right? It's a human emotion. I always say, though, there's always something under anger. It's, you know, fear, shame, humiliation. Figure out what's under the anger and then use it in a way that's powerful and doesn't end up ultimately like that woman in Central Park. She used her anger, but in a really, really terrible, deadly, and ultimately devastating way for her as well.
Yes. So, like I said, we could talk about this forever. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the comments, and I'll make sure we incorporate those. But how can people work with you, Lisa? And what's going on? I guess soon we technically could be open, but are people able to work with you virtually if they don't feel comfortable doing something in person?
Yeah, I mostly work virtually with individual clients anyway, so that hasn't been a huge change. I'm pretty good with Zoom and technology. My website's on there, lisakaplin.com. It's Kaplin. That's the best way to find me. And yeah, I work with individuals, groups, couples, teams, you name it. And virtual's pretty easy. And most of my clients say that it hasn't changed much. By working virtually, you know, we still get the job done.
And how can people follow you? You're on Facebook and pretty active there, right?
I'm on Facebook, so you can either friend me or follow me at Lisa Kaplin. And then I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
Oh, wow.
I post my blog weekly. I shouldn't say I do. My wonderful assistant does weekly, so you can see my blog. Where I share a little of my voice there as well.
All right.
In writing.
Well, thank you very much for taking time to talk with me today. It's always a pleasure.
It's always fun, Amy. So hopefully we'll see each other in person soon.
Yes. So before I drop off, I just want to let you know there's more of these to come. So this goes through next week. And tomorrow I will be talking about meditation with Jody Bodek. And on Saturday, movement with Heather Collins. On Sunday, hormone replacement therapy with Dr. Mullen from Vital Health. And then I'm taking a break on Monday. But on Tuesday, we start up again. So next week, we're also talking about yoga for bone health, exploring your creativity, sexuality in perimenopause, and also pelvic health in perimenopause. So lots more to come.
Awesome. You're hitting every angle.
Yes. Yep. There's so much. If there's anything we missed, please let me know, and I'll make sure we cover it at some point. But
it's a great series. It's really great. Loving it.
And if you like or follow the North Shore Acupuncture Center page, it's easier to find the Facebook Live when it comes up too. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thanks, Amy.